Well, that movie was absolutely nothing like I thought it was gonna be. Undergods is brought to us by director Chino Moya and stars Tanya Reynolds, Bern Gorman, Ned Dennehy, Katie Dickey, and more. We follow a whole bunch of motherfuckers doing a whole bunch of shit. Ultimately, this movie is described as, according to the filmmakers themselves, an otherworldly journey through a Europe in decline as a collection of ill-fated characters confront their doomed futures and fortunes. Okay, I mean, yeah, I guess, kinda. Undergods is ultimately an anthology film, yet all the stories have something very loose in common with each other. And when I say loose, I mean really loose. This is really just a collection of stories that are totally unrelated that maybe have a leading character or event that starts the next story. And this is a weird one, and it is not gonna be for everybody. Now, there is this one storyline that kinda goes through most, if not all, of the other storylines about these two guys that are kinda like trash men that go around and pick up dead bodies, but they also pick up living people sometimes too and go and sell them to some type of like slave labor factory or something. And this seems to be common practice in this world. We don't really get a lot of explanation as to why or what's going on there. It just kind of happens. The movie takes place in the future, but it's not like high-tech sci-fi future. It's more kind of just run down, everything's kind of gone to shit future. Not totally post-apocalyptic yet, but we're on the way there. Think less Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior and more Mad Max 1. The world is still here, things are still kind of operating, people are trying to go about somewhat of a normal life, but things are just crumbling down around them. Now admittedly, I wasn't totally on board for this entire thing. There's parts of this movie that are just kind of difficult to get behind. But then on the flip side of things, there's some things this movie does that are actually really damn good, especially in the technical department. The movie looks great, it has a wonderful aesthetic. It's a really interesting, just shitty looking world, but shitty looking in a good way. I wanted to know more about this world, why it is the way it is, how it got this way, what all's going on, why are there dead bodies on the fucking street that trash men have to come and pick up? But we don't really get any of that. It just is what it is. This is the world that these stories are taking place in, and you just kind of gotta accept it. The movie also has a great score. I really dug the music in this flick. It's very reminiscent of kind of a throwback synth 80s style. Not like too far out there. It's fairly subtle for the most part, but it's a really cool score. The movie also has style for days. I really dug the overall style of this movie. Unfortunately though, where the movie starts to fall apart a bit is its narrative. Not all of these stories are created equal. The first story that we come across is just really kind of out there, and I get what the story is trying to say, what its deeper meaning is, but the way that it goes about it is really abrupt and kind of awkward. And as I said, even though I do get the deeper meaning of what this story is trying to say, the way that it ends kind of robs it of a lot of that meaning. That being said, the first one is interesting, if nothing else that it is just so weird. Now the second story, this is the one that I had some issues with. This one just kind of lost me. It has an interesting look, and the performances in this one, as they are with all of them, are all really good. But what's going on is just kind of boring. In fact, this story that does lead directly into the next one seems like it might just be here to get us to the next story. And if it was like a lot shorter, I'd be fine with that. But this story takes up a nice chunk of time, and during that time, I got kind of bored with it. Now, the third story is the highlight of the movie narratively. It is the one I really enjoyed. Now, it's still really fucking out there, but it was the most enjoyable. Without ruining anything, it is about a man who is thought to have been dead for the past 15 years, who abruptly comes home, and how that shakes up the world that's been built without him. How does the family that he left behind, and that has inevitably moved on, deal with this person that's thrust back into their lives? Now, it's pretty out there, much like the rest of the stories, but it is interesting. This one was the most entertaining of all. Overall, Undergod's narrative was a bit difficult to get on board with. It's not really hard to understand once you get that this is an anthology film and what's going on, and it's not hard to follow, but at times it's hard to just stay invested in it. It's an interesting world, but the stories they're telling aren't always the most most interesting story. I will, however, say that the overall style in this world that they've created, regardless if we don't really get much explanation about the world, is the movie's saving grace. During those parts where you're not really interested in what's going on screen, that world and everything else is what will keep you on board. It's what will keep you going to the next one. Guys, Underworld is a very interesting, if not always totally entertaining flick. Director Moya did a great job of crafting this really interesting world that you want to know more about. Unfortunately, the narratives that take place in this world aren't quite as interesting as the world that they inhabit. The movie looks fantastic and has a great score. This is not gonna be for everybody, but those that it is for should absolutely check it out on streaming.
Across the street.
This movie was a lot like a Stanley Kubrick movie that you don't really like. It's like a movie that you don't really care for the story and you're not really invested in, but for some reason you just can't stop watching. Kubrick had a few of those for me, like Eyes Wide Shut. I don't really care for the movie, but for some reason I just couldn't stop watching it. That's this movie. While I don't think it's the greatest movie ever, I just couldn't stop watching it for some reason. So if all that sounds like the kind of flick you'd be interested in and you're looking for a pretty weird movie for the evening, then check out Undergods and I think you'll have a reasonably good time with it. So there it is, guys, my review of Undergods. If you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you liked what I had to say, give me a like. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, stay sexy, Cardiff. I mentioned that the third story in this movie is the most interesting one. And putting myself in the situation that the movie puts these characters in, there is no fucking way me as the husband would ever let this shit fucking happen. Probably the most unbelievable part of this fucking movie. Hell no. Have you lost your fucking mind? Sucks that that happened, but you have lost your fucking mind. Shit is not going down like this. I mean, I say that. I know in my world, it ain't going down like this, and I kind of look at this situation and say, what the fuck? Who would allow this? But then I hear some of the stories, like real world stories, about how people let some shit go down in their houses, and I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? So this type of situation may be more real and believable than I ever thought. God damn, what the fuck's wrong with the world today? This movie might actually be ahead of its time and just telling about the decline of humanity. Ah, fuck, I think that's what it is.